We've got a great guest for you first. His name is Dan Carlin. He's the host of Common Sense with Dan Carlin. Dan, welcome to the Young Turks.
I appreciate you having me on the show. I want to congratulate you on the new arrival to your family.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
It's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It is. It's a fascinating thing. We got another human being in the house. It's kind of weird.
It is strange, and you've known that human being for 9 months, but now you got to meet him.
Yeah. No. There's definitely a lot of surrealness to it, and it's pretty cool. So thank you for saying that. So, Dan, first, tell us about your show. What is Common Sense with Dan Carlin?
Well, when I was a radio show host, I was a guy that never fit in the daytime programming lineup. You know, you had all the right-wing talk show hosts, and then you had me, and I was kind of this Martian that poor audience had to put up with, you know, the missing link in the day part that screwed everything up. And when the podcast came around, I was working with a company that kind of saw that coming ahead of time and said, you know, why don't you do what you did on the radio, on the Internet? And the audience on the Internet is so much younger, and there's a lot more political independents like you, and it ought to work out. And we did a bunch of podcasts for them before taking it off to our side, and that's essentially what it is. It's the radio show I used to do, which is an independent political radio show. So instead of Rush Limbaugh and all those guys, you have me, and I don't really fit in anywhere. And half the audience is mad at me after every show.
All right, I'm fascinated by that. I'm going to get back to that in a second. But first, I'm given to understand that you are a wildly popular podcast. What does that mean? Like, how many people are watching these or listening to these?
Well, we do two. We do one on history also called Hardcore History, and that's the more popular podcast. And my own theory is it's more popular because Common Sense is a similar show to what you do in the sense that we talk about U.S. politics and current events. And people from around the world are sometimes curious about that and tune in, but a lot of times it gets a little too deep for people who don't live in the American system. The Hardcore History podcast is the one that anyone from around the world can get into, so that's bigger. We do about 300,000 downloads a month, and we put out about 3 episodes, 2.5, because I only get a Hardcore History show out about every 2 months. So 2.5 episodes out in a month and about 300,000 downloads.
All right, that's great. So what does it mean to be a political independent these days?
Well, it's better than it used to be, I'll tell you that. You know, the good part about it is if you look at the polls, and I try to take some solace from the polls, it looks like the number of political independents is growing. My own theory is that, you know, older folks who grew up in a more, you know, where your party affiliation was really like a totem. You know, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, and my whole family's always been a Democrat or Republican. I feel like those people are sort of moving on out of our system, and the younger people coming up, got a lot of college-age listeners, they don't seem to buy into the two parties as much as our elders did, and that's my crowd. And 15 years ago, my crowd was a lot smaller, so to be a political independent these days means hopefully to be, you know, to be taken seriously. It was hard to get taken seriously 15 years ago.
Dan, I'm with you on that, and, you know, I don't even understand that old school way of thinking, like, oh, this family's always been a Democratic family. Like, it doesn't compute for me because that's not how we grew up. But my question, though, is on policy. So let's talk about how you are conservative. What are you conservative in, for example?
I don't like to spend more than we take in. I mean, maybe that's a reflection of what I'm like in my personal life, but you know, the more I see budgets that are just so far beyond what we take in every year, you sit there and go, okay, I understand we need a lot of stuff, but at some point, I mean, you know, what's that old line? If something is unsustainable, eventually it will end. You get to thinking that can't be good policy. And so in one sense, I'm conservative because I'd like to pare our budget down or our expectations down or our society down or whatever we need to do so that we can pay our bills.
Dan, let me press you on that in a couple of ways.
Sure.
One, I share your concern. But, you know, a lot of economists say, hey, you know what, it's actually a small percentage of our GDP, and relative to other countries throughout the world, et cetera, that we're not doing that bad on the deficit. Do you buy that line of reasoning, or if not, why don't you buy it?
Well, you know, it's a similar line of thinking that I always hear when I talk about the fact that we're spending too much on the defense budget. People will say, well, listen, as a percentage of GDP, we're spending less than we spent in the 1950s. And I always say, yeah, but look at where we were in the 1950s in terms of, I mean, the future was very bright in the 1950s. We were the manufacturing giant in the world. You know, all these kinds of comparisons ignore certain structural problems in our system. You know, you can talk about debt being a percentage of the GDP, but where's our manufacturing base? I mean, where are we going to build out of that later, and how's the GDP going to look in 15 years, you know, when maybe the dollar's not the reserve currency anymore? I think there's a lot more that plays into that.
I hear you on that, but I already noticed something you said that was interesting, because most people in Washington that claim to be fiscally conservative will never touch defense spending and will never raise taxes. They just mean we just want to cut whatever is going to Social Security or Medicare or other programs for the poor and the middle class. Are you consistent on that? Are you willing to cut defense? Are you willing to raise taxes?
Oh, listen, not only am I willing to cut defense, what I always try to tell conservative folks is what kind of deal are the American taxpayers getting from our defense budget? What's in it for them? I mean, they're always concerned about taxpayers and their rights and, Medicare and Social Security, and that's all great, but there's a lot of Americans that if you put Medicare and Social Security on a ballot would vote for that, even with the structural problems and the costs and all that sort of thing. What's the American taxpayer getting from being deployed in 100 and, the number changes, let's just say 120 countries in the world, more than 700 military bases, we're the global policeman, and we pay for that? Okay, well, what's the upside? I know what I'm spending. I'm spending in real terms about a third of the federal budget's discretionary budget. What am I getting for that as a taxpayer? So, yeah, I think we need to take a whole look at the defense structure and where's that peace dividend we were going to get in 1990.
Right, and unfortunately, it's turned from the Department of Defense to the Department of Offense. We didn't get any defense. We got attacked on 9/11, and even to this day, the Christmas Day bomber sneaks in, etc. The guy who shot up the Army base, that happens. We're not really getting defense. What we're getting is offense, and the reason we're getting that, of course, is because there's a lot more money to be made for military companies to fight wars than to try to defend the country.
I think you have to ask yourself, too, if our foreign policy isn't causing us more problems than it's solving. I mean, I know it's heretical to say that we had anything to do with the fact that we're in this war on terror, but one wonders if the things we do not have a blowback effect that end up making our situation even less secure, which causes this vicious circle where we want to get more money and more defense because we feel less secure because of a foreign policy that's starting. I talked to a military guy recently, and he was saying, what do you think about the situation the U.S. military is in? And I said, I feel bad for him. I said, they send you guys to put out fires, and by the time you're sitting there stomping on the embers of one, our foreign policy started another one someplace, and then they expect you people to go take care of that. So, yeah, I think we need to take a look at that. It's costing us a fortune, and I think it's worth asking us what the American taxpayer is getting from it.
So, Dan, as I hear you talk, it sounds a little, first of all, it sounds a little like me, but it also sounds a little like Ron Paul and Rand Paul. So let's see which side you fall, because I totally diverge from them when it comes to the role of the government. They seem to think that it has almost no role, and I think that, yeah, for example, in regulation, that when it comes to Wall Street, of course we should regulate them, and you need refs and cops on the beat, etc. Where do you come out on that?
I think the recent financial crisis, the oil well, anything you want to look at shows where there was too cozy of a relationship between regulators and the people they were supposed to regulate. I mean, all you have to do, I'm a history guy in my mind anyway, and all you have to do is go back to the times when we had company stores and, to sit there and think that the system is going to be self-regulating. I've always, I have a lot of libertarian listeners, and God knows I love them. But at the same time, I think we've seen that movie before. I mean, there's some common sense understandings of human nature, and one of the things is that people can be greedy, and people can, especially when you get them in groups, you get that mob mentality, and you start saying, I have a fiduciary responsibility, and to heck with this. I mean, it becomes very easy to rationalize all sorts of decisions that if you took those people aside in these corporate boardrooms, they wouldn't do that in their personal life. And I think that's the kind of thing that's why you need to have referees. The problem in my mind in our society right now is the people that are supposed to be doing the refereeing are, let's use the right word because I think language is important here, corrupt. And that to me is the problem. We talk about this in our show all the time. Being an independent means that you've lost faith in the Democrats and the Republicans. And there's a lot of people out there that will say, my party's the good party and the other party's the bad party, or the really honest ones will say, listen, I know my party's not perfect, but I vote for them because the other people are more evil. That's where we are today. There's nobody giving money representing us, the American people, as a whole. All of these special interest groups and corporations have segmented our society into, well, you're an old person, so we're AARP, so we give money, we represent you. There's nobody representing the common good and nobody giving money for that cause.
Dan,
and yeah,
I hear you on all that, and ideologically we're nearly identical so far on these issues. But what can you do about it? Because yesterday I was talking about the same thing on the show, and I said, look, in the long term I want to fight against it, but in the short term, you can't check out. You got to go and vote for somebody. And under our current system, I'm going to vote for the guy that's less loathsome, and that's just the way life is. And unfortunately, that's the way life has always been. So what can you do about it?
Well, here's the thing, and it's kind of an optimistic, and I tend to be a little pessimistic because I think the system's screwed up. But there are some optimistic sides. I think the optimistic side in this, and some guy explained this to me once, and it blew my mind, but he said, we can stop this right now. He said people just have to vote differently, and that's a weird concept. It's as simple as everybody deciding, John Lennon or some figure comes forward and tells all the young people, to vote differently this election. A bunch of people vote differently, and we wake up the next day with a different, group of people in charge.
Well, we did that, though. we
well, no.
For
well,
Obama,
wait. But people who are not, see, that's the problem in my mind, anyway. It's my opinion that these two parties are a part of the problem. Either they prevent people from getting too high up in the in the election system because you don't win primaries, or people that get there are corrupted along the way. I mean, you could look at Barack Obama, and if you're a fan of the president, there's a lot of interest groups that are very powerful in his party that exert all sorts of control and block all sorts of initiatives. And I mean, who knows what Barack Obama could have done? I'm not sure he has a free rein to do that, and I think one of the reasons why are a lot of these groups.
So then, if you're going to go to independence and you say, look, even if Obama promises you change, and that's what we want, and we want to change the system, you do, I do, etc., but you don't believe him because he's part of his party, and that party sucks him down, and those are all great points, right? So who do we go to? Do we go to Ralph Nader? Do we go to Mike Bloomberg? Do we go to Ron Paul? Who do we go to?
Well, I think what happens is the conditions dictate what sort of people you get running for office. I think that there are a lot. My stepdad once told me, he said, if you're a really smart, competent, individual, dynamic person, the likelihood of you going and wanting to serve in government is small because the downsides are huge and the upsides are small. I think that when the climate appears to be receptive, to the proper mood. I think you look at, and I personally didn't like him, but as a big outsider who was the most successful in the last 20 years, you look at a guy like Ross Perot. Ross Perot was reading the tea leaves in the early 90s and saw a public mood that seemed to be receptive to an outsider coming in and running. I think if the public mood seems to be receptive to that, let's say in 2 years you get Barack Obama and his approval rating is very low, and he's running against someone like Sarah Palin, a lot of people just might be disgusted, which opens up an opportunity for some guy or woman to come in on a white horse and play the savior.
Okay, now, and I know it's not just one person, and I don't want to best hope in another person. Don't get me wrong.
I know. It does feel like we all got burned, doesn't it?
Right. No, and I get all that, right? But at the same time, we also have to be realistic. And I want to get a sense of where you're coming at this from. I mean, who would that person be for you right now if you had to pick someone?
I don't have anyone. People ask me that all the time. I don't see anyone on the horizon. See, because part of the problem is I'm not sure that person should be a politician. I mean, I think I look at our government sometimes and think, it used to be a very right-wing thing to say term limits or to say that maybe professional politicians are the problem. But maybe they are, and if that's the case, then maybe you need someone who isn't even on the political radar right now. And maybe that's a little bit of a dream situation. But I mean, I don't know what people are going to do. Let's just say you voted for President Obama and you feel like you got burned. What are you going to do now?
Well, if it continues down this way, I'm hoping that somebody runs a primary against him, right? And by the way, this is all short term. Long term, we got to change the system. We got to change campaign finance reform. We probably have to change the way we do voting, maybe allow for, runoffs, et cetera. So those are the long-term goals. In the short term, maybe Howard Dean runs against him in a primary. I don't know. That sounds really far-fetched. The flip side is maybe you're right. Maybe we're disenchanted with Obama, and then he's running against the clown of the earth, like Sarah Palin or even Mitt Romney, in my opinion. And then Bloomberg steps in and says, hey, you know what? I got several $1 billion. I can do this thing. And I'm not really a Republican. I'm not really a Democrat. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. And I'm going to bring you real change. And maybe he's full of it. Maybe he's not, and maybe he wouldn't. But maybe, just maybe, he could pull it off.
Well, ask a different question, though. The question I think you need to ask is, can a person who's really going to make the kind of change everybody says they want, can that person get to the White House? Or, it might not even have to be the White House. If you want to talk groups of people and take over the Congress, can a person like that get the special interest support, and that can be corporate or outside, influences, whatever? Can they get the support they need to get that job? And if they do, are they tainted by that support? You could get the next great hope for either party, and if they get to the White House and they're totally beholden to certain groups and interests, you're going to get fake health reform and fake banking reform and all that kind of fake Medicare reform and all that stuff.
All right, well, that's why I say Bloomberg, and that's why Perot was successful, because they both had so much money, or, Perot did and does, and Bloomberg does now, that they don't have to be beholden to special interests. But I don't want anybody to take me the wrong way. I don't know if Bloomberg's the guy, and I'm sure, and I've seen some positions of his that I don't agree with, and that's, of course, always going to happen. And it's kind of perverse that we put our hope in someone who's a billionaire because we don't have any other choice, right? But fundamental reform is the ultimate answer. How we get there is going to have to be for another day and another conversation with you, Dan. But it's certainly interesting. The show is called Common Sense with Dan Carlin. And Dan, where can you find it?
Go to dancarlin.com or catch us out we're on iTunes. The shows are Hardcore History and Common Sense. And I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. No, we appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, Dan.
Take care.
All right. We'll be right back.